Does Utah work in the Big 12? We're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. First time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, fun crossover, had Locked On Baylor's Cam Stuart join me, and we talk about what has been a hotly debated topic ever since it was announced that Utah would be joining the Big 12 is, does Utah actually work in the Big 12? Is this something, after we've had one season under our belt now, is this something that can work moving forward? We talk about that, as well as the challenges of recruiting against the bigger brands like the SEC and the Big 10 from a Big 12 perspective. Hope you enjoy this crossover episode with Cam Stuart. Cam, I've been wanting to have this discussion with another Locked On host for a little bit now, and you guys have played Utah 2 years in a row, so I thought this would be something fun to discuss. Utah is a very polarizing presence in the Big 12. Some of the fans have done Utah no favors. Some of the Utah fans, like by painting a target on the back. I know for me, like, people weren't happy with how I talked about the Utah team coming into last year, because I most of the media I thought they were a deserving favorite to win the conference on paper. And Cam gets hurt and a bunch of other things happen, and you just didn't go Utah's way. But I'll say this. I do think, despite all the drama and everything, I do think Utah works in the Big 12. In fact, I think they're really fun in the Big 12, because I think in a lot of ways they're a villain. And that's where it makes it a lot of fun, is that other teams get frustrated with them. And I kind of like that in some ways Utah has that target on their back. I think this is a fun conference too. I've just enjoyed being part of the Big 12, building these new rivalries, having the games involved. I hope Utah is looking to stay in the Big 12, and I do think that they are. And I've enjoyed this first year. I'm excited about the future. I think Utah works in the Big 12. How do you see it?
Well, I think to throw a question at a question, and you kind of touched on it in there, isn't so much isn't so much as Utah, do they work in the Big 12? Do Utah fans want them to work in the Big 12? I think is more the question from our standpoint, because I think they work great. And we talked about this in the preseason. Like, Utah, as I would say, a program on the rise. It's been on the rise for 15 years, really, or 20, even if you want to go back even farther. But in terms of building up that brand and that recruiting status and the big-time bowl games and all that, and the strides that Utah has made as a school, which shouldn't be kind of pushed aside either for when you're taking someone into a conference. It is a major state university that has a big old football stadium, wins a lot of games. That, to me, fits right in with the Big 12, which rocks, by the way. The Big 12 rocks. Yes, and it's too bad that some Utah fans don't see that, because I see Ute fans on Twitter all the time talking about how, this part of the Big 12 sucks. And, look at the attendance in the Big 12 championship game. We had better attendance when we were in the Pac-12. It's like, you want to go back to the Pac-12? Go back. They'll take you in a second. I mean, you want to go and have that? And that plus I look at the standings at a team that was 2-7 in this conference, this awful conference with no fans and no prestige. It's like, man, do you even want to be here? Like, I mean, I would have loved Baylor to get another shot at Utah with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback for the Bears. So it's more a question for me of, like, I see all these fans on Twitter, and it's like, do they want to be in the Big 12? Because I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the Big 12. And again, with Utah's stability, I think they're a team that could be challenging for the conference championship most years. That's what we're trying to figure out in this new conference without UT and Oklahoma, although UT kind of took the last decade off, of who's going to be that team that's kind of in the mix every year. And if you had asked me before the season, I would have told you Utah and Oklahoma State. And we saw how that factored in this year with a combined 2-16 conference record. But I think those are two teams that should be in the mix every year. And again, this is not a diss on Utah. This is I think a compliment on Utah. this is where they should be. Like, this is the kind of conference Utah should be in. They Pac-12 obviously would make more sense geographically, but it's not there anymore. Then you're playing Utah State in conference. Have fun with that. You know what I mean? But it's not there anymore. The Big 12 is a perfect spot for them. They're biggest rivals in this conference. It expands their recruiting map, which I know we're going to talk about. And it is the third best conference in America. Like, I don't know that a Utah program competes in the Big 10 or the SEC every year. I can't say that at all, but I can say it with the Big 12. And you saw it. I mean, this was actually kind of a everyone beats everybody year in the Big 12. Most years you're going to have, in a 12-team format, 2 teams either in or around that 12 playoff. And so if I'm Utah, I'm like, look, this is a conference that is going to give me the best chance to be successful every year. I wouldn't be denigrating the Big 12 as much as some fans are on social media.
Great points, but number one, I got to start with technically 3-7. I want that win against Baylor to count. We still beat.
Hey, I mean, I think that's actually fair. I think that's fair.
I will say something that I totally agree with you. If Utah, because I've done this before with BYU, because that a couple years ago when BYU beat Utah, by the end of the year, Utah was better than them. Baylor was better than Utah by the end of the season. But I still want that win as a conference win counted. That's where, like, we get compared to an Oklahoma State who didn't win this. It's like, oh, Utah only won 2 more games. Well, technically, we at least got to win against.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Another thing that you brought up that was so true, just about like people bringing up the attendance in the Big 12 title game. I can find several examples of Pac-12 championship games that were not well attended. So I don't think that should be used as a metric. There was
like the Big 12, it didn't have a great attendance this year. It did not. I thought that was a bad look. But you look around also college football this year. The conference championship games did not have the same sting with a 12-team playoff. Which, look,
they did not.
If these opening campus rounds of the playoff are fantastic, which they probably should be,
I think they will.
Then you'll probably concede as a fan that the conference championship games aren't that great. But sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that. It was just such an interesting point. I thought that they were like, oh, look at the attendance. Like, who cares, really?
Well, I mean, some of those too. Like, if we do when Utah played USC, geographically, that was a 7-hour trip for the Trojans. I want to say it's a 6-hour trip for Utah, a drive. The Iowa State and the Sun Devils don't have that luxury. That's not as
Trust me, I basically just did that. It's not fun. Long? It's not a lot. I mean, to Ames from Arlington, it was probably like 7 or 8 hours.
Oh, so it is a long. Okay, so it actually is a long.
It's a haul. It's kind of a haul, man. I mean, then again, you do have like a lot of Kansas City, Iowa State people. So anyway,
we're not locked on geography, so I apologize. I apologize if that was wrong there, but I just do feel like it's a longer drive and trip. So like, it's just not as convenient as some of those Pac-12 titles were. And there are definitely years where the Pac-12 attendance was down. So I'm not a fan of that. And I think talking about some of the other things you brought up, this is the other thing I'll say that just makes it very hard when Utah's athletic director goes out there and says we were not happy to be in the Big 12 today. And I do believe, like, if you listen and ask Mark Harlan, he meant in that moment, he let his frustration get the best of him and was talking specifically about that moment. But at the end of the day, the athletic director at Utah said, we're not happy right now. I'm not happy to be in the Big 12. That's what he said. Did he mean in general, as in all athletics? No, he just meant in that exact moment because he was frustrated with the refs, even though one of the refs was a Pac-12 ref. So that's where it was also kind of a wild statement that he made when he was just losing his mind there. So overall, I do believe most Utah athletics, I think, is happy in the Big 12. And I also believe that Utah fans are happy to be in the Big 12. There's always going to be that majority that thinks that they're just better, I guess. But unfortunately, it's just not true. And another thing you mentioned too, did I want, back when all the conference realignment was going crazy, was I hopeful that Utah was going to make the Big 10? Yeah, it was just like the best. It's the best of the, like, Big 10 SEC. Like, that's the club that if you can get into, you want to be into. But Utah is not in a position where they can compete for conference titles in the Big 10. So I'm glad they're in the Big 12, where what's fun about the Big 12 is we have so many different teams and brands that can win it. People could say that's crazy. Arizona State just won the league and they were picked to finish dead last. So this is a wild conference. It's an open conference. I think it's a lot of fun. This is where Utah belongs. And I think overall, most fans are happy for it. They're enjoying it. They're excited because this is the future. Like, this is what Utah is in now. There's a lot of exciting things. These new rivalries I mentioned that are being built, and the opportunity to get to the playoff each year for Utah exists because of this format. So I believe most Utah fans are happy, Cam, but I definitely get what you're saying in terms of that. There's a vocal majority on social media that doesn't make it feel like Utah fans are happy.
That's where you get the villain stuff.
That's right.
Which, look, I mean, Every conference needs a couple of those too.
They do. They do. Is it Utah? Do you view Utah as the biggest villain in the Big 12? This is definitely going to be a title on this show in the future. Like, is Utah the villain of the Big 12?
Right now, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's weirdly because of a social media presence. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, Mark Harlan didn't do any favors right there. But here, you can clip it. Utah is the villain of the Big 12. Like, full stop. We got rid of UT and OU, which were the ultimate villains. Like, and there will be some ones that pop up periodically. You know, nobody outside of Boulder really loved CU in the conference this year. They weren't big Colorado fans. That could be one. But Utah came in with this air of superiority, and it absolutely translated online, which is where we're going to judge most of these fan bases now. So yeah, Utah is the villain of the Big 12 right now.
Mm-hmm. And it can't be Iowa State and Arizona State. I'm sorry, but like Iowa State was their first time making the conference title game in forever. Like if they go on a dynasty, obviously you become that. The Chiefs weren't always the most disliked team in the NFL, and now they definitely are, just like the Patriots were back then. Arizona State, they just won it one year and they picked to finish dead last. I don't see them as the villain. I think
if they keep winning though, that Dillingham, that could get annoying.
That's a great point.
I'm telling you.
Point about how teams and people view Kenny Dillingham.
Man,
he could build himself into that. But yeah, just like Alabama is like the villain of the SEC for what they had done, and more so in Utah's case, right? It's not what they've done in the Big 12. It's how they spoke when entering it too, and coming in with some recent conference championship victories. So they felt like, okay, myself included, obviously, Utah's going to get off to a hot start, and they didn't. So I feel that way too. I think that Utah is kind of viewed as the villain in the conference. And like I said, I kind of like having the target on Utah's back personally. I just think it's kind of fun when everyone wants to talk about it's my team and me against the world. Well, in Utah, in a lot of ways in the Big 12, it actually is, because no one really roots for Utah. Not like every conference is rooting for other people too. But I think if Utah and like Texas Tech play, Cam, you're cheering for?
I'm wrecking them.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a weird relationship with Tech, but I will root for Tech over Utah. Yeah,
exactly. I will. That's what we're talking about. So,
if it's a conference championship and Utah wins it, there will be one congratulation text to JT Wistrcill, and that's it. That's it.
You know, I appreciate that, my friend. I feel the same.
There will be threads of Tech getting hosed on my Twitter timeline, but there will be a text to JT.
I appreciate my friend, and I share that same sentiment for if Baylor pulls through as well. I really like. I've enjoyed playing Baylor. Like we'll talk about that more in the second segment here in a moment. But I've enjoyed Baylor. I would love if like there's some teams I want Utah to play every single year. Baylor's one of them. I feel like it's just a good respect between Kyle Whittingham, between Dave Aranda, both programs that have the potential to be a contender in the Big 12 year in and year out. So I hope that Utah and Baylor keep playing each other. But one thing we know about. What were you saying? You too?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Exactly. One thing we know that Utah and Baylor have in common, though, is they're trying to recruit in the NIL and transfer portal landscape, which is obviously puts them at a big disparity with the top dogs being the SEC and the Big 10. Want to talk about the best way the Big 12 schools can recruit moving forward in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you've gone from 1 to 2 or 20. TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on the progress, so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Head over and get TurboTax today. All right, Cam, talking about how you recruit in the modern era of college football. I think it's really tough to be Big 12 teams because you see the SEC and the Big 10 prize some of the best guys away. I'm curious about Baylor examples. I want you to tell me about those. Utah is a corner in Cameron Calhoun, who was really good last year. He transferred from Michigan to Utah. He tweeted out that he was going to stay at Utah. Man, am I doing the thing that all these guys do? Okay, he's locked in. He was even messaging other like he posted on Twitter, like, Utah fans, show this guy some love. Let's get him to Salt Lake City. Then like 3 days later, enters the portal. And reports come out that he's gotten more lucrative offer from some of the biggest brands in the sport, Miami being one of those two, and like, some Big Ten, some SEC, because that's what ends up happening in today's college football world. So I do think it's really challenging to recruit. I don't think it's ever been harder to land some of the best guys, just because a lot of them might just go where the highest offer is. And I think what becomes even more important for the Utahs and the Baylor is developing the talent you do get.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see with a lot of Big 12 schools, like how many of them take, I guess we'll call it the Dion approach now, or the failed Jake Spavital approach at Texas State, of like, how many of these guys are just going to build their team through the portal? It's not an easy thing to do. But especially when you look at a Utah, which, as you know, I mean, not a recruiting hotbed, obviously California nearby, which is a big help for the Utes. But I look at Baylor through the lens that I look at it through usually, and it's like Baylor could be amongst those schools just because of their profile of a program that should just go for guys in the portal. But they're also smack dab in the middle of the best football state in America. You know what I mean? It's an advantage for a Baylor, for a TCU, even a Tech, who's a little bit off the beaten path, but can use that I-35 corridor and get some of the best high school talent in America. And they're overlooked as 3 stars because, they're a wide receiver and their ex-receiver is a 5-star going to Michigan. You know what I mean? And so Baylor has that kind of advantage. I don't know that Utah necessarily does, but again, they do a heavy recruiting in California, so there's some of that. Sure,
some good high school football. Like, Utah has some good high school football, but when we're comparing it to Texas, California, and Florida, no, those are the best.
Where you can, fall. I mean, you could fall backwards into a decent recruiting class in Texas just by getting a bunch of 3 stars. So I've said this recently on my show about Baylor, and as it relates to the portal, I think Utah and most of the Big 12, to be fair, fits in this same kind of box here of the portal should be a huge asset for schools like us, because it could be a great place for guys that are coming from, the mid-major conferences, the group of 5, and are ready to take that next step up. For Baylor, it was DeQuan Finn, who was the all-MAC quarterback, MAC player of the year the last couple of years, had a great career at Toledo, and he steps up, becomes a starter at Baylor. Obviously, as you guys saw in Utah, it didn't work out. It did not work out. But that should be a good spot, a good destination for guys like that, a place like Baylor or Utah. But maybe more importantly, those bounce back guys, because with the portal, we're seeing guys less patient than ever. So you look at these 4 or 5-star guys that go to SEC Big Ten schools, and they don't get any snaps year 1 or year 2. And they're looking to get in the portal. I can show you the Big 12 and schools like Baylor and Utah, who, compete for conference championships and therefore will compete for playoff spots. They put guys in the NFL. They have, especially in Utah's case, great head coach. You're going to get a good damn experience coming here and play some big time college football. We saw it recently with Baylor. Kobe Prentice, a wide receiver from Alabama, did 3 years at Alabama. His numbers went down each year. And so he's like, look, I got to find a bounce back spot to go. Or Michael Trigg, the former 5-star tight end, started at USC, then went to Ole Miss, wasn't getting any shine there. He comes to Baylor, somebody's at my door, and he gets some big time play at Baylor. Utah should be the same way. And it's just interesting to see, how these programs continue to adapt to that, and whether they do take a full Dion method and bring in almost an entire new team through the portal, or whether they can still, utilize Utah and California as recruiting hubs. And I'm just fascinated by that. But they should be, most of these schools in this conference should be good destinations, especially for bounce back guys in the portal. And I think that's how you keep up.
Such a great point. That was one of my favorite lines I've ever heard on the show, by the way, when you were just like midpoint and you didn't even miss a beat. And then you're like, someone's at my door. Like,
yeah. Or someone's just trying to drop off a package for someone in the apartment building. Yeah. We get that a lot.
No, but you're absolutely right. So many guys that, hey, like Utah just last year, remember they got Tayshawn Lyons. It's a former 4-star receiver at Washington who now transferred to Utah. Now, granted, it didn't play a lot last year, but it's still like, hey, taking time, learning, growing, developing. That's still a 4-star talent you have there who went bigger, didn't work, and now falls back down. There's good and bad with everything. Like, I mean, literally pretty much everything you could think of. The transfer portal is a great example of that. Oh man, one of our guys balls out. Oh, that sucks. We got to lose him. Oh, hey, there's a guy who committed to a FCS school or a group of 5 school, Utah, Devin Dampier, the new quarterback. He balled out. Let's bring him on in. He can help us be better now. And same thing with, there's this 4-star that is underperforming at the Big Ten. Well, he's maybe just not getting the best coaching. Let's bring him in too. So
think of how often that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Of especially those bounce back guys. Like, you want to talk about how you compete with the SEC. Well, every year there's a couple SEC coaches that get fired, or worse yet, there's some that should get fired that don't. Look at Arkansas. I mean, they've got like 30 guys in the portal right now.
Yeah.
That's how you can compete with these guys. And I'm talking like former 4-star guys. I mean, there's one from the Central Texas area that I was looking at. 4-star guy, Arkansas. They're all in the portal now. So that's a way that you keep up. You take some guys who play, in some cases start, and you take them from those schools through the portal.
Mm-hmm. Wait, the SEC fires coaches? I thought it means more. So just like, why would they? They're better, already better than every other program in America. So outside, so I can't believe they fired him, especially in Arkansas. It's not like they lost to lowly Oklahoma State in the Big 12. Oh wait, they did, and not a single.
Oh man, I had so many Arkansas fans commenting on my video about the portal. Like, why would they ever want to go to Baylor? I'm like, look, we don't lose to Oklahoma State here, okay? So, like, lost to Oklahoma State couldn't be any one of us in the Big 12. So, yeah. It's just a gentle reminder. Yeah.
It's absolutely wild. So, yeah, and it's fascinating to see just how Big 12 schools are going to continue to recruit. If you look at the 2025 recruiting rankings, Utah's 38th, Baylor's 35th. So both sides able to land a couple of 4-star talents. So you're still staying competitive there. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to crack that. When you look at shout out to Georgia Tech, who is the 18th highest ranked recruiting class right now, outside of like Miami and Notre Dame. That's by far the most for non-SEC and Big Ten schools. So that's kind of great. There. I know Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, North Carolina ACC championship next year.
Ooh, Bill Belichick.
Many are asking. Yeah. JT will be there in his own backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be there.
I'd go to that. So yeah, literally just a short trip down to Charlotte. So that would be a lot of fun. You know what else was a lot of fun this past year, Cam? Caleb Lohner was a crazy experiment at Utah. The former Baylor basketball player, now Utah football and basketball player. Now that we're through with the Caleb Lohner football experience, we want to just talk about our takeaways and thoughts on it. And we're going to do that to wrap up the show when we come back. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season continues to deliver great game after great game. And if you want to get in on the action, you need to head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. You can get ready to take on the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, so many great games going on. We're gearing up for the last few weeks here. We got the playoffs just around the corner. How are the top teams going to perform? How are they going to do? Who's going to get the 1 seed in each conference? Those last few wild card spots up for grabs. The Denver Broncos going to find a way to squeeze in with Bo Nix. How about over in the NFC? Are we going to see 3 NFC teams in the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings? It seems highly likely here. So however you guys are looking at it, and not just NFL, NBA, college football continues to deliver. We got another round of playoff games coming up here shortly, and so many fantastic games across the NBA, NHL, college basketball too. Head over to FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook today. All right, Cam, as we round this one out, talking about one of the players, there are very few things that Utah and Baylor have in common outside. I know we're now in the Big 12, but still, Caleb Lohner is one of those things. And Miro Little, who we'll have to talk about another time. It's actually been solid this year so far. But the Caleb Lohner experiment is over, and it was fun at Utah that everything was kind of it's been fun, kind of everything that was going on there for Lohner. And when you look at what he ended up doing on the year, he caught 4 touchdowns. And he only caught 4 passes in general. So it was a very interesting
red zone threat.
And he was, that's what his size makes him. So he ended up with 4 catches for 54 yards. I think overall the Caleb Lohner experiment was a success because I didn't think he was even going to contribute. So the fact that he helped with 4 touchdowns, he only had 54 yards, but those 4 touchdowns, he was a big red zone jump threat for them. And I actually think Lohner, I want to get your thoughts on this too, Cam. I think he's done enough in an era of the NFL and betting on potential, I think he's going to earn an undrafted free agent invite by some team that's intrigued by his size.
Crazier things have happened. Let's
Yes,
just say that. Rico Gathers was a 4-year letter winner basketball player at Baylor, and he got drafted into the NFL without playing a down of football. So it could happen. Now,
I didn't say I was talking undrafted free agent. Just
right.
That's all I'm saying.
Right. And it will be interesting because, you still got to do, combine and things like that to get on the radar. In fact, that would be a huge boost for him, right, is doing the combine because he is a great athlete. And that's in the basketball season. So I don't know, but I do want to remind the folks listening that those of you who watched our preview on the season, that JT did in fact say, I don't think Caleb's going to do much here. All these NFL tight ends here. He catches a touchdown week 1. I'm like, oh my God, like, here we go. And efficiency, man, 4 touchdowns, 4 catches, like that. That is a legit weapon right there. And there was one in the Baylor game. I swear I can't point to you at what time it was or even really what happened, but I know they went to Loner in the end zone and someone broke it up. And I was like, thank God. Thank God. Like, I couldn't have that. It was such a bad game for Baylor anyway that I was like, please do not rub salt in this wound by giving a Caleb Loner touchdown. All the best to him, but can't have that here. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't be stunned if Loner gets a shot in the NFL. I mean, to be honest with you, he's got a better shot at that than he does in the NBA. I mean, limited roster spots, not a scorer, doesn't create his own shots. Like, those guys don't do the NBA. But with that athleticism, like, you can get him on the right coaching staff and under the right coaching staff, and he could play. Yeah, at least a practice squad guy, which is what Rico Gathers mainly was. So I wouldn't be totally stunned if that JT prediction comes true.
First of all, I got to give you credit for pulling out that receipt. I was very high on Utah's tight end room, and I will still blame it more than anything on the quarterback play for how many missed throws there were and what happened.
Sure.
Not them.
And to be fair, I was not pushing back and being like, nah, dude, you just watch. Caleb Loner's going to be a touchdown machine.
On paper, it was Brant Keithy, and he was solid this year with the bad quarterback play. Carson Ryan, who transferred over and is now at BYU, actually, but a UCLA starter, Landon King, who had a ton of flashes, but it just didn't materialize because of the quarterback play. And now only one of those guys is left at Utah. And Cam, you bring up the receipts. I'm going to bring up some history as well. Caleb Loner actually wouldn't be the first former Baylor basketball player to be brought in by an NFL team. Now, would he, my friend?
Yeah, so you would have had Gathers as a drafted guy, but also Mark Vital was brought in by the Kansas City Chiefs, if we're going on that. Yeah, another guy who didn't play a down of football. Baylor had this weird kind of run because they also had Ish Wainwright, who's playing in the NBA, played his last year playing football at Baylor as a tight end and caught a couple tight ends or touchdowns, and then he actually ended up playing in the NBA. But yeah, Mark Vital, I don't know if he qualified for a Super Bowl ring, but was around a Super Bowl championship team. Mark Vital, the villain. Yeah. And
that's what happens, right? These teams who are in a spot where it's like, we're good. Like, why don't we swing for the fences on upside? They looked at Mark Vital and were like, hey, what if we could turn him into an elite tight end? Did it work? No. But I feel, but Caleb Loner, now that he's had some college play already too, like produced a little bit, that size, I still think he's going to get a chance. We've seen this before, like colleges, and it's a little different college NFL. Colleges will offer a guy who's never played football because they have the size and strength that they look at like, okay, this guy could become a good football player with even better coaching and things of that nature. I think some NFL team, it's like don't girls always say like, oh, I can fix him? Some NFL team is going to say that about Caleb.
Yeah. Dude, I have a sick nightmare that Caleb Loner is going to be just in the background, pads on, of an NFL Lombardi Trophy presentation, like next to Dan Campbell 2 years from now, like winning a Super Bowl. I could see it. Yeah. Why not?
You never know. I will say this. Do I think he's really going to probably work in the NFL? I'll go probably not. Do I think at this time, like, he will get an undrafted free agent invite? I'm going to say yes on that. Cam, what's your prediction there?
I'll go with yes.
Okay.
As much as I would love to push back on it, like, I believe all the points you're making, like, because we've seen it before. And at Baylor, I've seen it so many times with our guys that I can't just be like, no way. Of course not. Like, I mean, he caught more touchdowns than any of those guys, Baylor guys, did combined. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, he will be at somebody's mini camp.
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to make any predictions beyond that because I don't feel confident beyond that, but I do believe someone's going to bring him in. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with the Caleb Lohner experiment, and appreciate he's contributing for the Utah basketball team now. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe he's going to make a game-winning shot against Baylor, or I should say from
shot. Yeah,
I know that was on me.
A dunk that gets in just before the buzzer, maybe. Yeah.
Yes.
That's New Year's Eve. It's going to be not a lot of attention drawn. That is the Texas Bowl day. So I don't know. It'll be a lively arena. So maybe that plays into Utah's hands.
Yeah, maybe Lohner will play better without the brightest of lights. So we'll see how it all works out. Cam, you're the man. Thanks for always stopping by.
Hey, anytime, brother. Anytime. Go Big 12.
Go Big 12. I agree too. Quote that for any of you say I don't want to be here. That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor crossover. We'll keep you coming with content the rest of the week. And this off season has been absolutely bananas. So make sure you keep it at Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor.